Let me ask you a blunt question. If you walked into your organization tomorrow morning and you removed 3 layers of hierarchy overnight, would it collapse or would it finally breathe? Most leaders assume hierarchy is the scaffolding that holds a company upright. Without it, everything crumbles. But here's the uncomfortable truth. More often than not, hierarchy is the very thing suffocating performance. It slows decisions, strangles innovation, and quietly drains the life out of motivated employees. And the longer leaders cling to it, the more they mistake compliance for commitment. Think about the last time you had to wait for approval before you could act on an obvious solution. How many hours, days, or even weeks were wasted not because the idea was bad, but because the request had to climb a bureaucratic ladder? That's not strategy. That's inertia, dressed in a suit. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Research shows, not in theory, but in practice, that organizations with flatter structures consistently outperform their more hierarchical peers. They innovate faster. They engage employees deeper. They adapt to disruption without breaking. And here's the kicker. Employees in these organizations trust leadership more, even though leadership is spread across more shoulders. Doesn't that sound paradoxical? The less concentrated the power, the stronger the trust. That flips the traditional logic upside down. And it forces us to confront a critical question. What if everything we've been taught about control, authority, and structure is backwards? What if the future of business isn't about adding more layers of management, but stripping them away until the real intelligence of the organization, the people closest to the action, can finally speak and act? Picture a company where decisions don't need to climb a mountain before they can roll downhill. Instead, they're made right at the point of contact with the customer, with the problem, with the opportunity. That's not chaos. That's clarity. That's empowerment. But let's get real. Flatter structures aren't about removing all leaders or pretending authority doesn't matter. They're about redistributing authority. They're about saying, you are trusted, you are capable, you don't need to wait for permission to do your job well. That's where job satisfaction skyrockets. That's where creativity thrives. And that's where agility stops being a buzzword and becomes a lived reality. Still, many executives hesitate. They think, sure, empowerment sounds great, but won't we lose control? Won't people pull in different directions? Won't it all become a free-for-all? The irony is, the exact opposite happens. With empowerment, alignment grows stronger, not weaker, because trust replaces fear. Collaboration replaces territoriality. Initiative replaces excuses. I'm going to show you why flattening your structure is a proven, research-backed strategy for survival and growth. We'll look at companies that dared to remove layers of control and not only survived, but outperformed. We'll dig into the psychology of empowerment, the mechanics of faster decision-making, the spark of innovation that comes from freedom, and the unshakable trust that emerges when leaders stop hoarding authority and start distributing it. And here's the twist. I'm not just going to give you the feel-good version. We're going to explore the counterintuitive truths. For example, why less control actually creates more accountability. Why decentralizing decisions doesn't create chaos, it eliminates it. And why the real risk in today's business landscape isn't flattening too much, but not flattening fast enough. So, if you're a leader, an educator, or even an ambitious professional wondering how to thrive in this era of uncertainty, ask yourself this. Are you willing to step into a model of leadership where hierarchy shrinks and empowerment expands? Or are you still clinging to the belief that your people can only perform if someone is constantly watching them? Because the companies winning today and the ones that will dominate tomorrow are the ones betting on empowerment. They're flattening, they're trusting, they're innovating, and they're leaving everyone else in the dust. That's where we're headed. Job satisfaction and motivation. Let's start with something simple but profound. When people feel trusted, they don't just work harder, they work happier. And happiness isn't fluff, it's fuel. It's the invisible engine behind motivation, retention, and performance. Now, most executives already say they believe this. They'll nod in agreement when someone tells them employee engagement matters. But here's the catch: their structures betray their words. Because how can you talk about engagement when every decision requires 5 signatures? How can you preach empowerment when every initiative needs to crawl through a committee? That's not empowerment. That's micromanagement with a smile. Years ago, a global hospitality chain ran a quiet experiment. They told their frontline employees, the people cleaning the rooms, checking in guests, serving meals, that they didn't need managerial approval for small customer service fixes. If a guest had a complaint, they could solve it on the spot. If someone needed a free meal because their order was delayed, the server could say yes without chasing down a supervisor. What happened? The employees didn't abuse the freedom. They didn't bankrupt the company by handing out free steaks every night. Instead, their job satisfaction soared. They felt valued, they felt capable, and customer satisfaction climbed right alongside it. Because the guests could sense it too. Here was a company that trusted its people to do the right thing. That's the power of empowerment. It's not just about what employees can do, it's about how they feel when they're allowed to do it. And feelings matter. Neuroscience tells us that autonomy is one of the deepest human motivators. When people feel in control of their actions, their brains release dopamine. That's the chemistry of engagement. That's the biology of motivation. Now let's pause for a counterintuitive truth. Most leaders think control prevents mistakes. But in reality, control creates disengagement, which leads to more mistakes. When people feel powerless, they stop caring. They stop noticing. They check out. And when they check out, quality slips, errors multiply, and customers feel the difference. So the very control you thought was protecting the business becomes the thing that undermines it. Ask yourself, which is riskier? A workforce that occasionally makes small mistakes because they're moving fast and solving problems, or a workforce that's disengaged, resentful, and passive, slowly draining your competitive edge? And here's another rhetorical question. If you don't trust your employees to make small decisions, why did you hire them in the first place? Let's dig deeper. In a study of less hierarchical organizations, researchers found that employees who felt empowered were more likely to describe their jobs as meaningful. It's the difference between someone who works for a paycheck and someone who works for a purpose. And here's the kicker. Meaningful work is one of the strongest predictors of retention. People don't quit jobs they find meaningful. They quit jobs where they feel powerless. That's what micromanagement does to human potential. Flatter structures, on the other hand, give employees the sunlight and soil they need. Now, I know what some skeptics are thinking. That all sounds inspiring, but isn't empowerment just a soft, feel-good idea? Where's the hard business case? Fair question. And here's the answer. Empowerment is one of the few interventions that consistently shows up in research as improving both employee attitudes and bottom-line performance. For example, hospitality studies have shown that empowered employees deliver better service, which translates into higher customer loyalty and repeat business. Turnover drops, training costs shrink, and revenue climbs. That's not soft. That's ROI. Let me challenge you with one more thought. The real cost isn't in empowering employees, it's in not empowering them. Every time someone waits for approval instead of solving a problem, that's wasted time. Every time someone hides behind hierarchy instead of taking initiative, that's lost innovation. Every time a talented person leaves because they feel undervalued, that's lost potential walking out your door. So here's the question leaders need to ask. Are you willing to pay the price of disempowerment? Because whether you realize it or not, you already are. And this brings us back to the core insight. Empowerment isn't a perk. It's not a nice to have. It's the foundation of motivation, the trigger of satisfaction, and the secret ingredient of performance. When you flatten structures and push authority closer to the front lines, you don't just make employees happier, you make your business stronger. So as we move forward, keep this image in your mind. Every layer of hierarchy you remove is like cutting a hole in the ceiling of a stuffy room. Suddenly, air rushes in, people breathe deeper, energy returns. That's empowerment. That's job satisfaction. That's motivation unleashed. Faster decision-making and agility. Let me ask you something that might sting. How many great ideas in your organization have died, not because they were bad, but because they were slow? The truth is, speed is no longer a luxury, it's survival. In today's market, the distance between opportunity and irrelevance is measured in weeks, sometimes days. And yet, so many organizations still treat decision-making like it's a fine wine. The longer it takes, the better it must be. But speed doesn't spoil strategy. Slowness does. Think about your last urgent decision. Maybe it was about responding to a competitor, launching a product, or handling a customer issue. How many meetings did it take? How many approvals? How many email chains bouncing back and forth like a tennis match? By the time you finally had an answer, was the opportunity still alive or had the moment passed? That's the hidden tax of hierarchy. Every layer is a toll booth. Every approval is a stoplight. And while you're waiting, your competitors, the ones with flatter structures, are already on the highway, passing you by. Here's a real-world example. A retail group flattened parts of its hierarchy so frontline employees could make service decisions on the spot. Suddenly, they weren't waiting for corporate sign-off on every adjustment. They could respond directly to customer needs in real time. The result? Faster service, happier customers, and a company that could pivot quickly in a volatile market. Now let's be honest. Traditional leaders hate this idea. They'll say, but what if employees make the wrong call? Isn't it safer if leaders decide everything? And that's where the counterintuitive truth hits. The cost of a wrong decision is almost always lower than the cost of no decision. Think about it. A frontline employee might make a $500 mistake trying to solve a customer issue. Painful? Sure. But compare that to losing the customer entirely because you took too long to respond, a loss that could cost you $50,000 in lifetime value. Which mistake would you rather own? Let's dig into the psychology. Agility is about trust, yes, but it's also about identity. When employees are trusted to decide, they begin to see themselves not just as workers, but as stewards of the business. They take ownership. They think like leaders because they're treated like leaders. And that shift in mindset is worth more than any policy or process you could ever design. Here's a rhetorical question for you. What slows your organization down more, the mistakes employees make when they move too fast, or the hesitation they feel because they're afraid to move at all? I'll tell you a quick story. A mid-sized tech company once calculated the average time it took for a simple decision, say, approving a customer discount. The process had 6 steps and required 3 signatures. On average, it took 5 business days. Their competitors? They had empowered sales teams to make the call instantly within guidelines. By the time the slower company delivered an answer, the customer had already signed with their competitor. That's not just inefficiency. That's self-sabotage. Now here's where it gets powerful. Flattening hierarchies doesn't just make you faster, it makes you more resilient. Because when disruption hits a supply chain crisis, a new regulation, a sudden competitor, you don't have to wait for the top to figure it out. You already have dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of mini leaders ready to act, each solving problems in their own sphere. That's not chaos. That's distributed intelligence. That's an immune system for your organization. So let me leave you with this thought. In the 21st century, the companies that win won't be the ones with the longest planning cycles. They'll be the ones with the fastest reflexes. The ones that act while others hesitate. The ones that trust their people enough to say, "You don't need to wait for us. You've got this." Because agility isn't about moving faster at the top. It's about unleashing speed everywhere else. And every time you flatten your structure, you remove one more barrier between your people and the action. That's how you stop being slow. That's how you start being unstoppable. Innovation and creative problem solving. Let me start with a confession. Innovation rarely happens in the boardroom. Sure, strategy decks get built there, vision statements get polished there, but the spark, the aha moments that actually move a company forward, they almost always come from the edges, from the people closest to the work, closest to the customers, closest to the problems. And yet, in traditional hierarchies, those very people are often the ones with the least say. Their ideas have to crawl upward, filtered through layers of management. By the time an idea reaches decision makers, it's been diluted, reshaped, or killed outright. That's why so many organizations wonder, why don't we innovate? The answer is simple. Your structure is suffocating the very voices that could transform you. Here's the counterintuitive truth. If you want more innovation, stop centralizing it. Stop building innovation departments, as if creativity can only exist in a silo. Start flattening your structure so innovation can bubble up everywhere. Think about it. Empowerment is oxygen for creativity. When employees feel free to test, to tinker, to try, they naturally begin to generate new ideas. Not all of those ideas will be good, and that's the point. Innovation isn't about perfection. It's about volume. It's about letting 100 ideas bloom so 10 can take root and 1 can change the game. Here's a story. In a large public sector organization, researchers found that when employees were given discretion over their processes, they started proposing novel solutions to problems that had lingered for years. These weren't innovation officers. They weren't wearing fancy titles. They were regular employees, administrators, technicians, analysts. But once they were trusted with decision-making power, creativity flowed. They stopped waiting for permission to think. And when you stop waiting for permission, ideas multiply. Now, let's be clear. Creativity without empowerment is just frustration. How many times have you heard an employee say, "I had an idea, but no one listened"? That's the death of innovation, the graveyard of potential. A flatter structure doesn't guarantee every idea will be adopted, but it ensures that ideas aren't smothered before they see daylight. It creates the conditions for growth you never saw coming. And here's another counterintuitive truth. The best innovations don't always look like innovations at first. They often look small, ordinary, even trivial. But stack enough of those small improvements together, and suddenly you've transformed the way your organization operates. Kaizen in Japan taught us this decades ago. Continuous improvement beats occasional breakthrough. And continuous improvement thrives in flatter systems where employees are empowered to tweak and refine daily. Let me throw a rhetorical question your way. What's more dangerous, trying an idea that fails, or never hearing the idea that could have changed everything? I'll give you a concrete example. A mid-level engineer at Toyota once suggested that a tool on the assembly line be adjusted slightly to reduce strain on workers' wrists. It was a tiny suggestion, but that small adjustment reduced fatigue, which improved consistency, which boosted quality. Multiply that mindset across thousands of empowered employees, and Toyota didn't just innovate cars, they innovated the entire process of making them. Now imagine if that engineer's idea had needed 6 approvals, 2 committees, and a 6-month review before it could be tried. Do you think it ever would have happened? Of course not. Hierarchy doesn't just kill speed, it kills creativity before it's even born. Here's where psychology comes in. When people feel empowered, they don't just solve the problems they're told to solve. They start solving the problems nobody even asked about. They begin to see themselves as co-creators of the future, not just executors of the present. And when that mindset spreads across an organization, innovation becomes a habit, not an exception. Let's flip the script for a moment. Traditional leaders often fear empowerment because they think it will lead to chaos, too many ideas, too much noise, no alignment. But flattening doesn't mean everyone does whatever they want. It means the system is designed to capture, filter, and act on ideas quickly. It means employees know their voices matter. And when people know their voices matter, they tend to bring forward their best thinking, not their worst. So here's the takeaway. Flatter organizations don't just generate more ideas, they generate better ideas. Why? Because the people generating them actually care. They're not throwing ideas over the wall to check a box. They're invested because they know they'll be heard. In a hierarchical structure, that water is locked behind a dam, controlled by a few gatekeepers. Occasionally, they open the gates and innovation trickles out in controlled bursts. But in a flatter structure, the dam is gone. The water flows freely, irrigating the entire organization. It's messy, it's unpredictable, and that's the kind of innovation the future demands. Not the occasional big bang from the top, but the constant, creative hum from everywhere else. Trust and collaboration. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you worked in an environment where you truly trusted your colleagues, not just to do their jobs, but to have your back? Trust is the invisible glue of every high-performing organization. Without it, collaboration is fake, communication is guarded, and innovation is stifled. But with it, people share more, they risk more, they create more. Now here's the paradox. In traditional hierarchies, leaders often think authority builds trust. If I'm in charge, people will trust me. But in reality, it's the opposite. Authority breeds compliance, not trust. People may obey because they have to, but they don't necessarily believe in the system or in you. Flatter structures, by contrast, redistribute trust. Instead of saying, "You'll do this because I'm your boss," the message becomes, "I trust you to lead where you stand." That simple shift changes everything. Employees stop feeling like cogs in a machine and start feeling like partners in a mission. Here's a real-world study. Researchers looked at Fortune 500 companies and found that employees in flatter organizations reported higher levels of trust in their managers. Why? Because those managers weren't acting as gatekeepers. They were acting as enablers. They weren't hoarding authority, they were sharing it. And when authority is shared, trust multiplies. A multinational consulting firm decided to flatten parts of its hierarchy. Managers stopped requiring detailed weekly reports for every minor project. Instead, they held short, open check-ins where teams could share progress and obstacles. What happened? Employees no longer felt policed. They felt supported. The managers signaled trust, and in return, employees leaned into accountability. Ironically, fewer checklists led to more ownership. That's the counterintuitive truth. Less oversight often produces more responsibility. When you show people you trust them, most will rise to that trust. Here's a metaphor. Imagine two bridges. One is made of concrete, heavy and rigid. It looks solid, but when stress hits, it cracks. The other is a suspension bridge, flexible, built on tension and trust in its cables. It bends under pressure, but doesn't break. Hierarchies are concrete. Flatter organizations are suspension bridges. They may feel less rigid, but they're far more resilient. Trust also transforms collaboration. In traditional hierarchies, collaboration often looks like coordination. You do your part, I'll do mine, and we'll report up the chain. But in flatter organizations, collaboration is true co-creation. It's people sharing ideas, blending skills, and solving problems together, not because a boss told them to, but because they see value in it. Here's the psychology. When trust is high, people shift from defensive behaviors to generative behaviors. Instead of protecting their turf, they open it. Instead of withholding information, they share it. Instead of competing internally, they compete externally against the real competition. Let me give you a rhetorical question. How much energy is wasted in your organization on politics, turf wars, and cover-your-back emails? And how much of that could be eliminated if trust were the default? Consider this story. At a global design firm, teams were once notorious for holding back information from one another, fearing someone else would steal credit. After leadership flattened the reporting structure and emphasized peer recognition over managerial approval, something shifted. Suddenly, architects and designers began freely sharing unfinished sketches, half-baked ideas, even failures. Trust created psychological safety. And from that safety came some of the firm's most groundbreaking projects. Here's another counterintuitive truth. Trust doesn't come from controlling outcomes. It comes from sharing vulnerability. When leaders admit they don't have all the answers, when they invite input rather than dictate solutions, they actually become more trusted, not less. And collaboration, it thrives in that environment. Because collaboration isn't just about working together. It's about believing that the other person wants you to succeed as much as they want themselves to succeed. That's why flatter organizations win. They create the conditions where collaboration isn't forced, it's natural. Leadership shifts fluidly. The trust is implicit. The collaboration is seamless. That's how flatter organizations move, not as rigid formations, but as dynamic flocks powered by trust and collaboration. So here's the takeaway. Hierarchy commands obedience, but flattening inspires trust. If you want an organization that can adapt, innovate, and thrive, stop trying to control people into trust. Start creating the structures where trust is the default and collaboration is inevitable. Let me tell you something that doesn't show up in spreadsheets but drives everything you care about in business: emotion. We like to think employees make decisions rationally, weighing costs, calculating benefits. But every leader knows the truth. Emotion shapes behavior far more than logic. People stay in jobs, give their best effort, or walk away not because of perfect rational analysis, but because of how they feel. And here's the emotional reality of most hierarchical organizations. People feel small. They feel invisible. They feel like their contribution doesn't matter. Do you know what that does over time? It drains life. It silences creativity. It drives your best talent straight into the arms of your competitors. Now let's flip it. In flatter organizations, the dominant emotion is empowerment. Employees feel seen, valued, capable. They feel trusted. That emotional charge, that sense of ownership, is rocket fuel for retention. Because people don't leave jobs where they feel empowered. They leave jobs where they feel powerless. Here's a story. A young software developer once told me, "I don't need free snacks or a game room. I just want to feel like my ideas matter." At her first company, a rigid hierarchy meant every suggestion had to climb 3 layers before it was even acknowledged. She stopped offering ideas. She stopped caring. Eventually, she quit. At her next company, a startup with a flatter structure, she was encouraged to pitch directly to the leadership team. Not all of her ideas were adopted, but they were heard. They were respected. And that was enough. Her engagement soared, her loyalty deepened, and she became one of the company's most valuable innovators. The difference? Not money, not perks, empowerment. Now let's add a counterintuitive truth. Emotion is not a soft side of business. It's a hard driver of results. In other words, if you ignore emotion, you're ignoring profit. Here's a metaphor. Imagine your organization as a stage. In a hierarchy, most employees sit in the audience, watching a few people act out the script. They might clap, they might critique, but they're not part of the performance. In a flatter structure, everyone is invited on stage. Everyone gets a role. And when you're on stage, you give your best not because you have to, but because you're part of the story. That's what emotional engagement looks like. It's the difference between employees who are present in body and those who are present in spirit. Now, let's talk retention hooks. Leaders often focus on retention through pay raises, bonuses, and perks. But retention isn't about golden handcuffs. It's about golden meaning. It's about employees feeling that their work matters, that they belong, and that they're trusted. Studies show employees consistently rank meaning, purpose, and autonomy as stronger motivators than money alone. Yet most organizations pour resources into perks instead of flattening structures. Here's another rhetorical question. If your best people left tomorrow, what would they say drove them out? Lack of trust, lack of autonomy, lack of recognition. And if you know that, why not build structures that eliminate those reasons in the first place? Here's a story to drive it home. A manufacturing company once faced high turnover in a single department. Exit interviews revealed the same frustration. I'm not trusted to make decisions. Everything has to go through a manager. So leadership tried something bold. They flattened. They gave line workers discretion to adjust processes within clear safety limits. Turnover dropped by half within a year. Not because wages rose, but because dignity did. That's the emotional core, dignity. People will walk through fire for leaders who give them dignity. They will leave at the first chance if they feel stripped of it. So here's a metaphor to close this section. Think of empowerment as lighting a fire. In hierarchies, leaders hold the match but never let employees touch it. In flatter structures, everyone has their own match. The workplace becomes a constellation of sparks, lighting up with ideas, energy, and innovation. That's emotional engagement. That's retention. That's the glow of an organization alive with trust. Let me leave you with a sticky line, a retention hook for your mind. People don't quit companies. They quit hierarchies that make them feel powerless. And here's another. The currency of the future isn't control, it's trust. That's what flatter organizations understand. That's why they don't just survive, they thrive. So let's step back. We've walked through the case for flattening hierarchies. We've seen how empowerment fuels satisfaction and motivation. We've seen how faster decision-making creates agility. We've seen how innovation thrives when employees are trusted, and how trust itself becomes the foundation of collaboration. And we felt the emotional weight, the difference between a workplace that drains people and one that ignites them. Now the question is simple. What will you do about it? Because here's the truth. You don't flatten an organization by talking about it. You don't build trust by putting it in a mission statement. You don't empower people with slogans. You do it with structures. You do it with choices. You do it with courage. And courage is exactly what it takes. It takes courage to give up the illusion of control. It takes courage to admit that your employees might see reality more clearly than you do. It takes courage to stop being the bottleneck and start being the enabler. But here's the counterintuitive payoff. When you give away control, you don't lose power. You multiply it. Because suddenly, your people stop waiting for direction. They start creating momentum. They become co-leaders of the mission. And when you have an organization full of leaders, not just a handful at the top, you become unstoppable. So here's my call to you. If you're in the C-suite, stop measuring success by how many layers report to you. Start measuring it by how much authority you've given away. If you're a manager, stop asking, how can I control my team? And start asking, how can I unleash them? And if you're an employee, stop waiting for permission. Act like an owner. Lead where you stand. Because flattening isn't just a business strategy. It's a mindset. It's a cultural shift. It's a decision to believe that intelligence doesn't sit at the top of the org chart, it's distributed across the whole system. A flatter structure is a network. It's living, breathing, adaptive. It bends but doesn't break. It flexes with the times. And in a world defined by disruption, networks will always beat fortresses. Every day you spend clinging to unnecessary layers of hierarchy is a day your competitors are moving faster, innovating more, and winning trust you're losing. Here's the final challenge. Walk into your organization tomorrow and remove one layer. Just one. One unnecessary approval. One redundant meeting. One step between the problem and the solution. Do that, and you'll feel the air rush in. You'll feel the energy return. You'll feel the difference. And once you've done it once, you'll want to do it again. Because you'll see what leaders around the world are beginning to understand. The future belongs to organizations that trust their people enough to let them lead. So the question isn't whether you should flatten your structure. The question is, how fast can you? Because the leaders who move now will write the future. And the ones who hesitate, they'll be studying case studies written about someone else's success. The choice is yours. Empower or stagnate, flatten or falter, lead the future or be left behind. It's time.